I'm gonna sit down singing some blues, baby. Ooh, gonna try my best to be politically correct. Said I'm gonna sit down singing some blues, baby. Ooh, Lord, I try my best to be politically correct. And so you won't mistake me for the white patriarchal power structure, honey. I'm gonna sing this song with an African-American dialect.
Hi, hello everybody. It's a public conversation. We're on every Thursday night live on Missoula Community Access Television. We have 3 guests tonight, and our first up is Chet Blaylock. Chet's been on the Montana scene a long time. In fact, I was reading his bio. I realized that I was collecting tin for the war effort as a 5-year-old while you were out in the Pacific. You did a lot of naval time yourself in World War II. Is that right?
Yes.
So I thank you for that service, and I think I was kicking in my little help with the tin I collected back there. Anyway, so I wanted, I seriously wanted to thank you for doing that service in World War II, and also I was.
Well, Uncle Sam didn't leave me much choice.
But I'm always struck by the irony of being in the state of Montana in which we still honor Jeanette Rankin, who cast the only vote in Congress against the war that you served in. But I think that's kind of a poetic.
I admire Jeanette Rankin, though. She stood by her principles. She could not vote for war and said so. And that's the highest duty I think that a politician can perform, is to stay with their conscience and their beliefs. And she did that.
Chet, I wanted to give the audience a little, and you can add to this. You've been a professional teacher for many years in Montana, mostly in Laurel, which is kind of your hometown. Is that right?
No, my hometown was Joliet.
Born there.
Yes, born and raised there. I graduated from high school in Joliet, and then when I came back from the service, I went to Eastern for 2 years, and then I graduated from the University of Montana here at Missoula.
Right, and you got your master's in education, is that right?
In 1957. I started teaching in St. Ignatius, and then I went to Chinook, Montana, and then to Rudyard, and then I taught the remainder of my career in Laurel.
And then, 2 decades in the Montana legislature?
Yes, I served 20 years.
Was that all in the Senate, or
all in the Montana State Senate.
All in the Senate.
I was also privileged to be a member or a delegate to the Montana Constitutional Convention.
And I did want to touch on that. And by the way, if the screen hasn't showed it, I didn't say that Chet Blaylock is a Democrat, and he's running for governor. He's opposing the incumbent, Mark Ruska, the Republican. And
well, I think we probably should say, McCarthy, too, that I do have an opponent in the primary, Mr. Kelleher from Butte.
Right. Okay. Well, I haven't been able to get to everybody on this show.
Yes.
We have a limited amount of time. And Chet, some commentators have pictured you as the Democratic Party's sacrificial lamb in this race, carrying the banner of, in the face of certain defeat against a popular Republican governor. Nobody else seemed to volunteer for this nomination. How do you respond to this analysis?
I don't run political races to lose them. I'm in this race to debate, to look at the issues, and to win. And that's the only way that I think that I can be fair to the people who are supporting me, is to have that attitude.
Well, what are the defining differences, as you see them, between yourself and Roscoe?
He and I are different on the minimum wage. I am for raising the minimum wage. He is opposed. He signed 2 bills which seriously degraded our rivers and streams that came out of the '95 session of the legislature. I am for returning Montana's water standards back to where they were before the '95 session.
So you're a backer of both those initiatives that are,
yes, I am.
That are in process.
And I might add, too, that another difference between us is that I'm a firm supporter and an enthusiastic supporter of Bill Clinton for re-election as President of the United States, and he will be forced to support Bob Dole, so that's a difference.
I'm interested in that because it was a surprise to many in the whole United States when Montana went for Clinton 4 years ago. Do you think Clinton's got another knock at this state?
You bet. I think that Clinton will do well in Montana.
Beyond the things that you mentioned, what do you see as Roscoe's biggest mistakes as governor?
Well, I simply...
Mistakes or...
I don't know whether it's a mistake. There's a disagreement on philosophy. I've already mentioned the minimum wage thing. I've mentioned the water quality issues. I would not have signed those bills. I don't... Probably it's not fair to say, well, it was a mistake. It's simply a disagreement in philosophy of the way the state would go.
Well, so what's your own agenda? I mean, if you, let's say you had either a Democratic legislature behind you or one house of the legislature behind you, you're elected governor, what do you want to get done?
I want to begin to turn Montana around, particularly on the outlook for education in this state. I have spent my life in public education. I think we are reaching the point where we are going to seriously begin to damage the public school systems of this state. If we do that, it's like eating our seed corn. Our graduates from our schools, our university system, must have trained intelligence to sell, to be successful, and to keep Montana successful. We're moving into a global world, a technological society, increasingly technological society, and our people must be prepared, and that is through education. And we must have more financial support for our schools, and I would, as a governor, I would very much work to convince the people of this state that this is a good place to put our effort.
Into education?
You bet.
At all levels?
Right.
Have you been satisfied with the restructuring of the university system over the last couple of years, you know, with the VOTEX and...
Well, I was in favor of making the VOTEX schools into part of the college system. I think that our VOTEX colleges are turning out good students, and what they're doing there and what's being taught is very important for our society. Yes, and I was part of that effort when I was in the state legislature. I'm also in favor of what we did in putting, you might say, the two units, with the president of Montana State University at Bozeman ahead of those units, and then President Dennison here in the University of Montana ahead of their units.
Some presidents at Montana's public universities are also holding down side jobs, sitting on corporate boards with major Montana commercial interests such as mining and the timber industry, and receiving substantial sums of money for this corporate work. Do you believe this is appropriate?
Well, I've already stated publicly that I think it was a mistake for our people to be doing this. I don't think that you can serve two masters, and I think that we should at all costs avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest, if not actual conflicts of interest, and I have so stated.
The university, the regents are sometimes seen, in some eyes, as far too powerful and removed from public participation and scrutiny. Recently, the Attorney General's office issued a report saying that the regents have engaged in some illegal land sales over the many years. And we'll all be voting on a referendum this fall which would eliminate the regents, put university control under an expanded Department of Public Education. Correct me if I'm not describing it correctly.
And a czar.
What do you think of the regents' role as it stands today and as it might behave under a Blaylock administration?
I am supportive of keeping our Board of Regents system and the Commissioner of Higher Education. We did that in the 1972 Constitutional Convention. That's the way we set it up. I don't think any system that you set up operates perfectly all the time, and I wouldn't pretend to say that our regents have done so. But I think it would be a mistake to try to go back to the old system, excuse me, where it simply becomes, the funding of our university system becomes a political football every legislative session, and whoever has the largest, most persuasive delegations gets the biggest piece of the pie and also that political pressure can be brought on to different academics if they don't like the way they're doing things like it was in the old days. I don't want to go back to that system.
Going back to the Constitutional Convention of '72, what do you see as that document's most important contribution to Montana? I mean, there were many, but could you, what do you think?
Well, I'm prejudiced here, but I served as vice chairman of the Bill of Rights Committee. I think Montana has an outstanding Bill of Rights in their Constitution. I think also that the way we opened up in our Montana Constitution the public hearings, public meetings, the public work of the state legislature, that these were very significant steps that we took. The Montana State Constitution is still held up in many places as one of the foremost documents in the world, because it really gives democracy a chance to work in this state. I'm very proud of the work that we did.
It's often referred to as a green constitution, that is to say, because it has some strong language about the environment.
Yes, it does.
Do you see any slippage there? You know, I mean, we've talked about the lowering of the water quality standards, but I'm thinking now, I mean, there's a lot of controversy now about mining. You know, we always have controversies over mining in Montana, but we have three biggies coming up here now. The one down by Yellowstone, the 7-Up Pete up on the Blackfoot, and then the effort up by the Idaho border and the Cabinets, silver mining effort. Now, taking the 7-Up Pete up by Lincoln as one example, and a lot of that land sits on Montana school trust lands.
Yes.
And you, as governor, would sit on the land board. Now, of course, a lot of, one way of interpreting it is that you have to get, maximum financial benefit out of those school lands. But in light of the Green Constitution, isn't there a balance there? I mean, where do you fit into these mining squabbles here?
I believe that mining and a good environment can go together. But if at any point you have to make a choice between a good environment, clean air and clean water, or the mining, then I fall on the side that we have the clean air and the clean water. I made this statement when I announced for this to run for governor, that if we lose our clean air and our clean water in Montana, we've lost the only gold that's really valuable. That's my position.
I have the perception, and it's just that, because I'm not, I must say it's hard to read up on everything that's going on in this state because we don't get much information, meaning from the media, I guess is what I'm saying. But I have the perception that the Public Service Commission is either getting less press or that it has been somehow weakened over the years. Do you think the Public Service Commission needs any strengthening? What's your take on the PSC's role today and what you'd like to see it as in future?
Well, that's a broad question.
Well, I'm thinking about, railroads, for example, or, railroad safety. I mean, we've had an increasingly bad record on the railroads in Montana in the last several years.
Well, we've had some accidents. I don't know whether there's anything really, that the Public Service Commission has done or not done that has brought those things about. I think it's that the trains that are operating now are probably longer. They're moving more weight, and they're probably moving at faster speeds. I don't know, the Public Service Commission to delve into that. I don't know whether that really is their province.
Well, I guess I'm giving you a fishing rod here to say, if you think there's a problem with if you think there's a problem with the railroads, what would you set out to do as governor to improve that record? I mean, in other words, we have dealt with the railroads, and we took away the caboose rule, and the brakeman role on the caboose, for example.
Right.
I mean, obviously, clearly, isn't it? Unless I'm wrong, there is an opportunity for state government to take some action there, isn't there?
Well, I can't say, and I don't know whether anybody can say, for instance, what caused the accident west of here,
Right.
up by Alberton.
Right.
Those things, I don't think any railroad anywhere in the United States has always been accident-free. I think these are really big pieces of machinery that are moving, and I think those things do happen. And as far as, you know, the companies that are operating these railroads, they certainly don't want the accidents. I mean, it's very, very costly when they have these accidents. I just don't, I don't see the PSC stepping in there and really improving anything as far as the safety is concerned.
How much do you have in your campaign account?
Probably maybe a little bit better than 30,000 at this point, which is not a great amount of money, but we're going to do the very best we can with what we have. That's my whole attitude toward this race.
Earlier, before we came on the air, I talked about the possibility of Montana broadcasting both public and commercial, both radio and television, following the national lead and providing, you know, candidates for, you know, state and federal office with some, you know, free airtime to be able to express your views. How do you feel about that?
Well, I would like to, you know, have TV available. That's probably one of the most expensive things that a candidate has to face, is to try to buy TV time. So I would say that, you know, anything that would help the candidates to get their views before the public, I would be supportive of.
You know, a number of people have mentioned their shock and surprise that one of the teachers' unions, I don't know, frankly, I don't know which one it was.
Both of them.
Both of them?
Both the MFT and the MEA.
Endorsed Governor Ross?
Yes, they did.
And that must have been hurtful to you.
I was disappointed.
Right.
But
how did that come about?
I would like to say that, as long as you bring that up, that I still feel good about things, though, because I've had a number of teachers, quite a number of teachers, who have come up and said, Chet, we don't care what they did. You have been a real friend of education. You have been a real friend of teachers, and we're going to help you. So it's not a total loss by any means.
But politically, how did that come about? Had you done something in your career that offended the...
No, I think, without really knowing, I haven't been privy to what their deliberations were and why they came to their decision, but I think it's over a bill that was vetoed during the last session, which was very important to the Montana Federation of Teachers and the Montana Education Association. And they called it the Steps and Lanes Bill. And the Montana School Boards Association had pushed that bill through the legislature. It was lying on the governor's desk, and I'm guessing, but I think if they said, if you'll veto it, we're with you. And I don't know that for sure.
I see. And the sales tax idea always sometimes, you know, keeps on, you know, that balloon keeps on going up.
Yes.
Where are you on that?
I have been saying that, you know, that it just seems to me that the sales tax was turned down so decisively, 3-1, that probably it's a futile effort at this time to say, well, you know, we'll float another sales tax. The biggest problem I see with taxation right now in Montana is the fact that everything is being loaded onto the property tax. And that's what I'm hearing as I travel about Montana, is that people are very unhappy about the status of their property taxes. Because, and to help that, I think we do need to broaden that tax base. And my choice at this point is to say, okay, let's take a look at the progressive income tax.
It seems, looking at, I mean, based on what I perceive, it seems that Montana governors have made very few appointments of Native Americans to major policy-making positions in state government. Why is that, and would you make any changes in that regard?
If I had a chance to appoint well-qualified Native Americans to positions, I wouldn't hesitate for a moment. That would be my attitude. And I have served with Native Americans in the state legislature and have found them to be very well qualified and to do very good work, legislative work, in the Montana State Legislature.
Chet, I'm sorry, I think we got a call for you. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I was wondering what you thought about legalizing marijuana.
I don't think so.
Why is that?
Thank you. Actually, I have a related question about agriculture.
Right.
Vermont today and Kansas are both actively discussing on a state capital level of doing a pilot project in the growing of hemp as a commercial and successful product. As we look forward to our agricultural future, I mean, is that something that we might take a look at it?
Well, when we're saying hemp here, are we talking marijuana?
No, we're talking about hemp. In other words, like apparently there wouldn't be enough left to put a smile on your face. No, as a commercial product, making shirts, rope. I mean, there's a lot of garments being made, and
I think our farmers here in Montana that they should be progressively looking at if there's other crops that they can grow for profit. I would encourage it, sure.
And the Northwest Regional Power Planning Council,
Yes.
Established by the federal government a decade ago or more. And in recent times, it's that council, and there's one representative from Montana, one from Idaho, Washington, Oregon, seems to have grown, again, from my perception, they're taking a much more of a backseat role in planning, and could you comment on what you'd like to, what your observation is and what you'd like to see emerging from that council, or what could emerge from it?
Well, I think the Northwest Power Planning Council, in the beginning, it was a very good idea, and I would encourage them, as governor, I would encourage them to take a more aggressive role, and they have done some very good work, particularly in working with restoring the salmon and the salmon runs and saving some of the steelheads, for instance, from extinction. And they did some seminal good work in that area, and I would encourage that.
Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hello. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I had a question for Chet.
Yes.
I know Governor Roscoe's intervened in much of the debate over legalized gambling on some of our Indian reservation. I was wondering where Mr. Blaylock stands on letting tribes decide for themselves whether or not they want gambling.
I don't think that we can stop the tribes if whatever we allow in the state on gambling, as I understand it, then the tribes have the equal right to do it on their reservations if they so choose.
Any follow-up?
No, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, great. We got another caller. Thanks for calling. Hello, you're on the air.
This is Daniel, and I was wondering, given the fact that my figures are not actually supported, but in 1968, the University of Montana had approximately the same number of full professors as they do now, with an enrollment that was considerably less. What do you think, and how would you deal with education, higher education in Montana, given the fact that we are now, most of the students are being taught by either TAs or part-time professors, and the education level, in my mind, is less than it has been in many years?
We have to get more financial support for our whole educational system, and that takes taxation. And we've been on a roller coaster in this state for quite some time. We've had people, politicians running for office saying we can cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, and we can still have the same level of services, have the same level of good instruction in our university system and in our primary secondary system, and not have to make any greater effort. That's a false perception, and it's something that should not be said. I think we should tell people the truth. If we're going to have good systems, we have to be willing to support it.
I agree. Follow-up question. Do you think it's responsible for departments at the university to participate or take part in activities that are directly opposite or in competition with private industry?
There's always been some conflict in that area. I don't know. Do you have anything specific in mind?
Nothing
Caller?
I can say right at the moment, but I can talk to you about it later.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, McCarthy.
All right. Well, we've just got a few minutes left. We've got three guests tonight, and I'd love to keep on going with you and everybody
I've
for
enjoyed this.
a long time. But you're not off the hook yet.
Oh, all right.
When a judicial, I did some calling around. The University of Montana Law School. Oh, certainly in the last 5 years, and probably going back another 5, and maybe Jack Mudd would correct me, but the graduates from the law school are about 40% women, and
That's great.
right, and I see almost no women in the Montana judiciary, and no one else does either. I mean, there's very, very few women.
Well, we have a woman on the Supreme Court of the state of Montana.
We have one woman on the Supreme Court,
and
and there's one district judge, I believe, 2 district judges, and I guess my question is, the governor gets to make interim appointments to the court, when there's a vacancy arises, and the guys come in with their suggestions, and I never see any women on that final cut list for the governor's consideration, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on this seeming disparity.
Well, I think we should address that every time that we can. I think if there's women candidates who are well qualified to be judges, and there has to be more out there, they should be given due consideration.
Well, I mean, it didn't have a specific answer, right? I mean, I didn't mean to, it was kind of one of those long discussions, but it disappoints me, actually, as a citizen, to see the numbers of women graduating from our law school and not seeing them, there in the court system.
Well, we've come a long way from where we were insofar as the law school and women are concerned. I can remember when I was attending the University of Montana, there was only one girl at that time in the whole law school. All the rest were men. And now you say there's 40%. That's an enormous stride at that particular institution.
Sometimes it seems to me that we cast a kind of a romantic eye over our relationships with the Indian nations in Montana. That our problems with the Indian nations are greater than we pretend them to be. What's your take on that, and what do you see as any strategy you might have as governor to improve, relations between the state of Montana and the tribal nations?
All I can say is I would encourage all the cooperation. I know that's a general statement, but I think that would be the role of the governor, to encourage cooperation between the tribes and the state of Montana. And there has been, I don't think we should leave the impression that there has not been cooperation. There's been some very good work done in the area of water rights. And even on the gambling thing, they have come to agreements on how that's to be handled. And not with all the tribes, but with some of them. So these are steps in the right direction, and I would encourage it.
Do you think, are you a support, I mean, do you think the state should be in the business of running a lottery?
Oh, that's tough. I voted against putting in the lottery. But when it went in, then we decided that it's just one of those things, we need the money. And my community of Laurel, Montana, and Billings, Montana, and I suspect Missoula, would be in tough shape if they didn't have the gambling money. Now, of course, that involves both the lottery and then the private. Generally, I think it would be better if we didn't have the state running it. But I don't see the state giving that up soon.
Chet, what would you have liked me to ask that I haven't asked, and how would you like to wrap up our visit tonight? Why should folks be paying attention to you? What's going to make a difference with you in the governor's seat?
Because the governor and I see things in important areas differently. And I think that I bring a lot of years of experience in state government to this race. I would approach things in a different manner from him, and I want at the end of this race to people to be very clear about where Chet Blaylock stands as opposed to the governor. And if they are in, or if they do recognize the differences, they'll go in and cast a more intelligent ballot. And that's all I ask.
Great. Chet Blaylock, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you
McCarthy.
taking the time to visit with us. And I'm sorry we didn't have more time, but we'll do it again sometime.
Okay.
And thanks for running for public office. I know it's a tough job and it's a big one, and I've said that's all the candidates.
But it's also an honor.
Yeah. Good. All right. Thanks very much.
Right.
Okay. Watch you don't trip over your mic. All right. Next in the hot seat. Get a hand at that?
Oh, I think I can.
And, well, we're talking with Jim Regnier. Lives in Missoula, and he's an attorney. And I've never met him before, I don't think.
I don't think we have.
And he wants a seat on the Montana Supreme Court. Justice Chip Erdman, who will be on the program next week, by the way, is an interim appointee to the Montana Supreme Court, appointed by Governor Roscoe. And as per Montana law, he was filling the unexpired term. Previous justice who retired early, and now he has to appear on the ballot, and we get to say whether we want to retain him in that position or we don't want to retain him in that position. And at the same juncture on the ballot, we have an opportunity. I forget exactly how it works, but if we're voting not to retain that justice, then we also have an opportunity to vote for you to take that seat. Is that?
Actually, the way it works, McCarthy, is that when Governor Roscoe appointed Chip Erdman, Mr. Erdman filled out the unexpired term of Justice Fred Weber, who had resigned with about a year left to go on his term. So the ballot that the citizens of Montana will cast will simply have my name and Chip Erdman's name on the ballot, and they can make their decision as to who will be the next Supreme Court justice.
I see.
So there isn't a retention function.
Oh, okay. Then I'm just taking. I guess I'm taking from their name the committee to retain Justice Erdman. And
Right.
Okay, thanks. Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself, please. I know you're from the Midwest originally.
I grew up in a small town in Illinois.
You went to Marquette University.
Went to Marquette undergraduate, graduated with a degree in finance. I spent a little over 4 years in the Navy, and after the Navy, I went back to law school on the GI Bill, and graduated from the University of Illinois in 1973. Started practicing in a rural area of northwest Illinois in general practice, and then in 1978 moved to Great Falls, Montana.
And Jim, when we had a brief chat on the phone a week ago, and I noticed also on your bio that you've been paying a lot of attention to the role of mediation in the law, and that you've taken special training in mediation techniques and how to mediate and things like that. And what makes that, in particular, among other things, but what makes mediation valuable to you, let's say as a sitting judge on the Montana Supreme Court?
Well, I think in two areas. The Montana Supreme Court is an appellate court with 7 justices serving. And the decisions that are reached in any appellate court are ones reached by consensus. There's interplay between the justices. A majority of the justices sitting on the case have to reach an opinion. And and reach a decision on a particular case. I think just serving as a mediator and having experience as a mediator gives me some valuable experience in dealing with that type of decision making, reaching decisions by consensus. The other important area, I think, is that mediation is becoming very important in Montana. Here in Missoula County, we have mandatory mediation of cases in the district court before trial dates are set. In some of the other district courts in Montana, we have mandatory mediation, but not throughout Montana. This October, the Montana Supreme Court just recently adopted a mediation pilot program, which actually goes into effect this October of 1996, where cases that involve money judgments, workers' compensation cases, domestic relation cases, will be required to be mediated at the Supreme Court level while they're going through the process. So I think that mediation is playing an integral role in the civil justice system in Montana, and I think that it's important that we have someone on the court with that experience.
And you also mentioned in our conversation that you thought that there should be, correct me, there should be a mid-level court system. In other words, if an issue left district court and they were still squabbling over it, that before it got to the Montana Supreme Court, that there would be.
No, actually, what I said was that we're facing in Montana right now a situation where, because of the number of cases that are appealed and actually go to the Montana Supreme Court, we're facing a situation or a time where we're either going to have to find another way of resolving cases or adopt an intermediate appellate court, as many states have done. So my pitch is that through mediation we can avoid the expense of doing that.
I saw a report recently that the Vermont Supreme Court has what they call a rocket docket, and it's the popular term for it, in which not the full Supreme Court in Montana, but I believe it's 3 of the jurists who hear 5 minutes of oral argument. I mean, they have the paperwork, etc. But the plaintiff and the defendant or whatever each have 5 minutes of oral argument, and the Supreme Court, and then those 3 jurists try to give a decision on that case by the next day or within 2 days, or they say this is complex enough that we're going to hold it over for the full court. Would that be an example of I mean, how do you like that notion, or do you see any opportunities there?
I haven't studied that particular program, but I think we really, in Montana, need to adopt some type of program that gives oral argument its place again in the Montana Supreme Court. And let me just speak to that issue.
Okay, we got a caller on line 1, but I want you to finish your thought.
We had 17 cases, I think, in 1995 argued orally before the Montana Supreme Court.
17?
Right. When I started practicing in Montana, I don't know what the number was, but I'm sure it was, 80, 100. We have gotten away from oral arguments, which I think is wrong. I think we need to incorporate that back into the appellate court system.
Do you think, I mean, to me it's not, but do you think there should be television in the Supreme Court? It's not a momentous thing, but...
I don't think it would play a lot of significance because the Supreme Court isn't a trial court. There's not witnesses testifying. Its function is to hear oral arguments and consider cases. I don't think it would be pivotal one way or the other.
Okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, since you asked Canada about his college and military career, could you possibly speak about yours a little bit?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, myself. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I will briefly, if you will, but...
Thank you.
Let's see, what's my quick... graduate in political science from California State University in Long Beach, and a master's degree in broadcasting from Boston University, professional journalism fellow at Stanford University. Anyway. And I spent my military service along with, well, not along with, but anyway, I was in the United States Coast Guard, protecting life and property at sea. How much money do you expect to spend on this race?
We have a budget of about $140,000. That's significantly less than was spent in the last Supreme Court race between Justice Terry Treeweiler and Justice Gene Turnage. But between this race and the last race, we've had Initiative 118 enacted, which has reduced campaign contributions per person to $200 per person. Prior to that, it was $750 a person. So it's making, I think, fundraising a lot more difficult in one respect. In the other respect, it's requiring candidates to get a real broad base of support. So I just don't think it's feasible to raise and spend the type of money that was spent in the last race, given these new limits.
What was your toughest subject in law school?
My toughest subject in law school was a subject called Future Interests, which dealt with the a kind of a aspect of trusts and wills, one that I've used very little since graduation.
And occasionally there's controversy in Washington over the formal role and influence of the American Bar Association in rating the qualifications of individuals who have been nominated to a judicial position. And some want the ABA, a private, non-governmental organization, removed from the process. What do you think of this? And if you think the ABA should have a role, would you also consider it appropriate that the National Lawyers Guild, for example, another private non-governmental group of lawyers, also have the opportunity to make a formal recommendation?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the criticism of the ABA, which we're reading about today, is that the ABA has been rating the Clinton appointees much higher than they did the Reagan and Bush appointees, and that it's perceived, what I see anyhow, it's perceived that the American Bar Association is more liberal oriented than conservative, which I find interesting because in my entire legal career, at least among my colleagues, the American Bar Association is always viewed as a fairly conservative group of lawyers. Quite frankly, I think any organization that's recognized that can and is willing to play a role in evaluating court appointees or nominees, I'm in favor for.
And have you, either privately or publicly, expressed an opinion on creating a new federal judicial district along the lines proposed by Senator Conrad Burns, the model which would remove Montana from the 9th District and create a new district of Montana, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska?
I was appointed by Judge Batten in 1987, I think, to serve as a delegate.
Judge Batten is one of our federal district judges,
That's
right?
To serve as a lawyer representative to the 9th Circuit Judicial Conferences. And I chaired that delegation my last year. I served for three years. I think the opinions that I've expressed have been basically, I think, to retain the 9th Circuit in its present format.
Well, speaking of the 9th District, Senator Hatch of Utah has been holding up the nomination of Professor William Fletcher of the Bolt School of Law at the University of California, holding up his nomination to a seat on the 9th Circuit because Fletcher's mother, Judge Betty Fletcher, already holds a seat on the 9th Circuit bench. And Judge Betty Fletcher is considered a very liberal jurist, and Senator Hatch's tactics on her son's nomination have been called politically motivated. So let me simplify this for you. If another member of your family were elected a district judge in Montana, would you feel an obligation to step down from your seat on the Supreme Court of Montana?
I don't think so, because if another member of my family was elected as a district judge, we would have another female judge in Montana.
Okay.
And I would encourage that.
Good answer. I want to hit you with this business of women in the judiciary in Montana. Is that an inherent problem when we speak of an American justice system? When you have such a low number of women serving and.
As I was listening to your question of Chet, when Chip Urban was appointed this last time, if I recall, I think that there was a woman finalist in the 5
Okay.
names that were submitted to Governor Roscoe. I think Ann Bartos, a lawyer in Helena, was a finalist. The Carla Gray has been on the court for quite a while. The 2 district court judges that were referred to, March Johnson in Great Falls and Judge Catherine Curtis, I think, in Kalispell, are very recent, within the last year and a half. I think that if we don't start seeing women judges soon in Montana, we have to really take a serious look at it, because there are many, many very qualified women attorneys in Montana, and I think they should be encouraged to pursue those positions.
All right, a couple of things. In yesterday's New York Times, there's an article about the controversy surrounding a new child adoption bill before the Congress. It's a complicated issue. Involving, in some sections of it, involving tribal authority, Indian tribal authority, and the adoption of some Indian children by non-Indian parents. And Indian leaders argue that as the bill now stands, it will create a giant loophole that will undermine tribal sovereignty and let state courts, which may have little understanding of Indian culture, decide who is affiliated with a particular tribe. But my question is not about the merits of that bill, but I do want to ask, in your view, does the Montana Supreme Court and the many Montana district courts today have all the knowledge they need in dealing with Native American issues before them?
Well, I guess to answer that question, it depends upon the quality of the attorneys who are presenting the issues, whether or not the issues are well briefed, and whether or not the judges who are hearing those issues have an open mind and are willing to review the cases with an open mind. I think that the type of issues, of course, many of these issues dealing with the Native American community tend to gravitate towards the federal court system.
Right.
And, but, you know, I certainly think, as far as knowledge goes, that our state court system is equipped to handle those issues that do get through the system.
You do?
I do.
I guess let me restate my question. In other words, there's always opportunity for growth and learning for all of us, right? And I guess I'm wondering, in the Montana judicial system, and let's say you're sitting there as a judge and you feel that you need to know more. I mean, in other words, are there ongoing tutorials and requirements in the Montana judicial system where a judge has to, you know, is either encouraged or required to, you know, to be keeping up and to take, you know, I read about this.
I think that the Montana, every year there is certainly, I'm sure, at least one continuing legal education seminar that would deal with some of these issues. I think the most interesting aspect of your question, in my experience, however, deals with, since this campaign, I mean, there's always a controversial issue of whether we should have appointed judges or elected judges.
That was
And since I've been embarked in this campaign, one of the things that I've been doing is trying to visit all of the reservations in Montana, meet all of the presidents of the tribal colleges in each of those reservations, and speak to all the tribal councils, and at least have an opportunity to talk with the tribal chairman. And I can say that after practicing law for over 20 years, that's not an experience that I would have had had I not been involved in a campaign. And I think that if I'm elected to the Montana Supreme Court, just going through an elected process and going through a campaign has certainly opened my eyes to a lot of these type of issues.
Now, this is just based in my question. You know, occasionally here in Missoula, I'll see or read about a Native American on trial for, you know, X, Y, or Z. And I don't go to the courts and I don't see what evolves there. But I wonder this, and perhaps you can provide some insight, because I wonder whether a minority, let's say, in the state of Montana has, do you see minorities in Montana having as much right and need as they do have to a jury of their peers?
One of the first jury trials I tried in Montana was in Glacier County. And in picking the jury in the voir dire, there were many Native Americans in the panel. The question was asked of them whether they would vote, I was representing a Native American, whether they would vote for my client simply because they were members of the same tribe as my client was. And they all, regardless of the evidence, they said yes, that they would. And I think they expressed a cultural belief that they had, which is closeness amongst their tribal members. They were all disqualified from the jury. And so my client, who was Native American, was tried before a jury of all Caucasians.
Yeah.
And so these are very, very complicated questions because the composition of juries is something that is a result of examining through a voir dire process. And a lot of times it seemed to me in my experience that the Native Americans didn't fit through that process just because of the way they answered the question. And I guess I was at the Northern Cheyenne Reservation last week speaking with their tribal council, and I think tribal chairman is Levando Fisher, and he asked me, he said, I'm glad you're here speaking with us because we don't see candidates for the Montana Supreme Court that come out and visit us. And he said, although most of our cases are litigated in the federal courts, if you look at the population in Deer Lodge, there's a lot higher percentage of Native Americans in Deer Lodge than there are Caucasians. So I personally, I think the administration of justice needs to be done in a fair and equal fashion, and I think it's a challenge in many ways with some of the issues that we're dealing with.
So you're saying, I think I hear you saying that we have in Montana then at least some room for learning and
I think that's
evolving.
I think that's the bottom line.
And so, like here in Missoula, again, just so that I have a sense of it, do you see, or from what you know, but at least in the voir dire panel, there are sufficient numbers of minorities coming in to at least be considered as jurors?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have the information on that.
Okay, here in Montana, and around the country, and it's been written about. I was familiar with the movement from several years ago, and it probably has a long history before that. The fully informed jury movement, and it's been given some serious coverage in national newspapers of late in the last year and a half. And as I understand, the fully informed jury movement, as it were, in which the people who are backing this idea would require or encourage a judge in any particular case to explicitly inform the jury that the jury is the ultimate and final decision maker as to fact and law. In other words, that it was in their hands and that the jurist could suggest some guidelines and maybe point them in this area or that area, but that there was a need for juries to know that they had complete responsibility. Could you comment on this movement and what you think is going on there? And
well, I guess to open up, I disagree with that concept. I mean, I think that our system of justice, where the jury is the finder of the fact and the judge is the instructor of the law, and then the jury applies the facts to the law. I think that's the way the jury system should work. I think the whole idea of fully informed juries is something that's been around for quite a while.
right.
And I think there's a lot of people, commentators, who think that's exactly what happened in the O.J. Simpson trial, that the jury just rejected the law, reached a decision based upon what they wanted to, how they wanted to decide the case, and in some respects, you don't, the judge doesn't have, when a matter is submitted to the jury, the jury's, in a criminal case, is going to make a determination of guilty or not guilty. In a civil case, it's going to make a determination finding for the plaintiff or for the defendant. You're never really going to know whether they're rejecting the law or not, as long as the case is submitted to the jury. And so you're always going to have a lot of control in the hands of the jury. But I don't agree with the movement, and I think that our system of vesting the authority of finding as a finder of fact with the jury is the proper way to go.
Yeah, I think one of the cases that is usually cited is one of the classic cases in American jurisprudence, right? Zenger, the printer.
I'm not...
Peter Paul, from Revolutionary times or shortly thereafter, in which he was a printer and he published some materials, and then he was charged with libel or slander or something like that, and the judge gave the jury certain instructions. I mean, in effect, the jury said the law was wrong. We find this man innocent. I mean, that he violated the law as it stood. But that the jury, in effect, was saying to the world and to the judge handling the case, we find this man not guilty because we don't believe that the law is a moral law. So doesn't this? I mean, this has a very serious dimension to it. I mean, in our ever ongoing discussion of what law and ethics mean, I guess.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think that our jury system is such that if an issue is submitted to the jury for determination by the court has to make a decision that there is a factual issue to be decided. The jury has a lot of leeway.
Okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, Coyle, I believe you were talking about fully informed juries.
I was asking the candidate for the Montana Supreme Court about that. Yep.
Well, the one question that I have, I guess it's not really a question, but you mentioned Peter J. Zenger. He was a New York newspaper man in New York in around 1600, I believe. And there was a law that said you couldn't print anything good or bad about the governor, or he'd get put in jail. Well, obviously he said some things that the governor didn't like, and he was up for trial.
Right.
But the jury knew that those things were all true, that Peter had printed, so they let him off.
Right.
And that's one of the principles that's been around for quite a long time. And I believe there's only one case that's been at the Supreme Court, and that's Sparkman Hansen in the late 1800s, where they basically said that judges do not have to tell juries of the right to judge both the law and the facts and vote their own conscience. And so that's where it's situated. Juries can still do that, but we're now just kind of informing jurors of their actual rights that they can and should do that if we have laws that are unjust or oppressed, or the government's coming too hard down on a certain individual. And that's all I had to say.
Hey, thanks for refreshing us on the history there.
All right, thanks, Will.
All right. Good night. Is it? I'm waiting to see if we've got another caller here. All right. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, my name's Chris. And I wanted to know what makes you think that the system's going to treat Indians any better after what's been done to them as it is now.
I didn't.
I'm Filipino, and I've been having problems being called Indian and stuff. Why is anybody here going to change anything?
If I think what we're hearing is from a caller who sounds like dissatisfied and if not cynical about the future. If there have been oppression in the past. So I guess he's throwing that at you. I mean, what grounds do you, what can you do to assure a minority caller that, what kind of a jurist would you be in this regard?
I mean, I think that I certainly understand the frustrations that any minority has in this country with the history that we've had, but certainly in my experiences as a lawyer and obviously as a judge, if I'm honored to be elected. I certainly would keep race out of any particular decision that I made. I would judge the case based upon the law and the facts, and that's the way it should be.
I'm Filipino by birth. I'm from California.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've been here, I've been pulled over twice and been told, your kind don't belong here. And by the treatment of most people, I get that impression that I don't belong here. And half the time I wish I could die behind it.
Well, all I can say is, as far as I'm concerned, you belong here because you're here, and I don't mean to be lighthearted about that at all. And by being here, I mean that. By being here, I mean you, any caller, and yourself as a citizen of Missoula has the opportunity to come down and use this First Amendment facility and express yourselves and get some help in expressing yourselves. And Jim, I have to say that we've run out of time. I've enjoyed our dialogue, and I wish you the best in your campaign. It must be a difficult thing in a nonpartisan judicial race, because it's not as if you can judiciously go around beating up on the guy that you want to replace. Is that true?
Well, not only that, is that ethically we're not supposed to indicate how we would vote on a particular issue that's pending. So it is a challenge.
Right. Well, all right. Oh, I hope we get a chance to visit again sometime.
Thank you very much.
And stay tuned, folks, because we have one more guest. And they're very enjoyable. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jim Regnier, running for the Montana Supreme Court. And our next victim is...
Did I pass the microphone survival test?
I hope so. Can you hear him all right? Good. We got the thumbs up. And we're talking with Larry Jent, J-E-N-T. And Larry's an attorney in Bozeman, in the Bozeman area. Quite a varied career, outdoorsman as well. And just fill us in a little bit about yourself and your background.
Education, West Point, class of 73, 5 years active duty, most of it with airborne units. After I got out, I messed around Bozeman a little while and went to law school at the University of Colorado, returning summers to work in West Yellowstone. I worked as a fishing guide there. I neglected to get a job at a proper law firm in summers like one was supposed to do. And so when I got out of law school, I started my own practice in Bozeman, and it concentrates on, of course, that local area, West Yellowstone and Bozeman and the Gallatin Valley, but I now have pretty much a statewide practice, and I've been very fortunate to have a practice that I could manage to get myself away from for a couple months and run for Congress this spring.
Well, and you've run for office a few times in Montana, right? And haven't quite yet made it over the top?
No, I came the only other time I ran in the first time in 1990, and I ran in a Democratic primary, three-way primary for the House of Representatives, and I lost by 20 votes.
You mean the State House of Representatives?
State House.
Okay.
And nobody knew who I was, but I got some good marks from the state and local party people, and they asked me to go run again in a seat where I didn't live, but where there were no Democrat had ever held office, so I gave it a shot. And I gave a good campaign, but I didn't win.
Right.
I did get a chance to run in a primary election, and to run in a general election, I think that gave me a great deal of practical expertise in the general topic of elections and being a candidate. There's one great difference this time, McCarthy, that those experiences lacked. And that's that I have a forum and I get to speak. I get to speak in public at dinners, at meetings, to small newspapers and radio stations across the state, and of course on public TV shows such as this one.
What's motivating you to run for the United States Congress? I mean, while you have some, name recognition in the area that you live, I mean, like in Bozeman, and I assume people think well of you, and but you're probably on a low budget. What's your campaign spending these days?
My total campaign spending for advertising, we've raised around $15,000. I believe that's close. It's within, my treasurer can tell you exactly, but that's within a few $100s either way. Well, and but we've spent for advertising, we spent exactly $100 on cards, I think, for the Mansfield Metcalf dinner, because in this race, to advertise effectively statewide, you don't need tens of thousands of dollars. You need to really advertise effectively hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I will tell you, none of us have that. When the campaign finance reports came in, all the candidates, including myself, were in the low 5 figures. The reason for that, of course, was the precipitous nature of the race. We knew the race was going to exist in January when Pat decided not to run again, and so people had to extricate themselves from their lives and whatever they were doing, organize a campaign, and of course go out there and go around the state. Now, my way of doing it was to make public appearances, get exposure in the press, and appear at debates and candidate forums. So I challenged everyone to debate, which they accepted. Now, since everyone's been going around the state and debating every few days and going to forums, no one has had a great deal of time to raise money. I would have not have entered the race if I were running against someone who had a huge war chest and name recognition. There's not one single candidate in this race that has statewide name recognition. If you were to stop someone, stop 12 Missoulians in the street tomorrow and ask them to pick the 7 of us out of a lineup, I would say that you probably would not get a unanimous verdict.
No, I agree with that.
And so that gives someone like me a chance to run for statewide office, to run when you're relatively young, and to go out there and work very hard, and it's a great opportunity to serve in the Congress. Serving as Montana's lone representative in the Congress at McCarthy is a great honor, and we've had a great tradition there of people of competence and character in that position. We've had Jeanette Rankin, Mike Mansfield, Lee Metcalf, one could go on and on.
Burton K. Wheeler, Tom Walsh.
And to the present day to Pat Williams and Max Baucus. So we've had a tradition of people for whom it has been an honor to serve, and for Montana who we Montanans have been honored to have them. And so to get a chance to run for this office as a credible candidate, and I certainly think that I'm not only credible, but that I'm a serious candidate is a great honor, and it's something that someone who's interested in politics should be willing to do it. When this race came about, the only news about it was the prominent Democrats in the state that did not want it.
Well, okay, so all right, let's say you were to win this nomination and win the general election, and you're in the U.S. House of Representatives. All right, tell me what committees you'd want a seat on.
Excellent question. The first committee I would want a seat on is the Committee on the Judiciary. And the reason is because the Committee on the Judiciary has great power in law writing and law rewriting. And as a lawyer and as one who has gained some recognition in his field, I mean, I have been one of the handful of Montanans named to the best lawyers in America.
And let me say that I'll say that so that you don't have to say it yourself, you have a very impressive resume. You can give us as many details as you like, but it's a very interesting life and legal career that you've had.
And thank you, McCarthy. And I would hope, because that would be a committee where I would have a leg up on someone who did not have that type of background. That would be the logical choice for someone like me. And the other reason, though, is more subliminal. It's a powerful committee, and it's a committee on which one who wished to serve and work hard can gain credibility and respect for his state, and that background, hard work, knowledge, and networking in the Congress, which is a large body, that you need to be effective and to gain power. Power, of course, comes either from seniority or from the respect you get from your peers.
Right. Okay. Let's say let's say you're going to Congress and you were going to get one term. 2 years.
One term in 2 years. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, let's project that at the end of 2 years, for whatever reasons, you were gone.
I decided that I want to go up Rock Creek and type live and hang out.
If you could be the author or co-author of one law that you think would be of benefit to this country and this state, what do you think that might be in the area of?
Campaign finance reform and reforming the political process as a whole. Because I believe, McCarthy, that the greatest problem facing the Congress, and in fact facing all the candidates that have been before you tonight on your show, is restoring faith in government. In the Congress, we have some power to do that by enacting campaign finance reform. Of course, our Republican friends came in promising to do that, but I believe they got somewhat tired of it and perhaps at the same time became a little more enamored of the office itself. I'm supporting something called the Bipartisan Clean Congress Act, which is being touted and promoted by the citizen lobby Common Cause. Now that act imposes voluntary spending limits, in return for which the FCC licensed stations will give free time up to a period of 30 minutes in any segment the candidates want, and will give TV time at reduced rates to candidates who comply with certain voluntary spending limits, a cap of $600,000, and then 20% limits on personal money, out-of-state money, and PAC money. Separately in the bill is an outright ban on PAC money and another reduction in the amount of the PAC money which one political action committee can give.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's yeah. And I'd probably, if you were in Washington and you were promoting that bill, of course, I would come in as suggesting that the bill be amended so that we didn't have lower cost television advertising, but that we had no cost broadcasting advertising of political debate.
Yeah. I realize too that I am blessed in this race because, and it would be very unusual for an unknown to be able to get into a congressional race. But see, we have 4 unknowns. Some of them have served in the state legislature, but in reality, in our race in Missoula, I challenge a Missoula resident right now to name the name of a legislator from Helena, Bozeman, and Billings within the next 5 minutes with that source material. I just don't think they could do it. And so we have a true race of unknowns, but because of that, the press in Montana has been very exemplary in the conduct of allowing us access to the media wherever we go. Tomorrow I'll go to Ravalli County and talk to the radio and the newspaper, and if you want it and you want to work for it, the access is there now in a free manner. But it might not be so in a race where there was a great lopsided tip between name recognition and money and so forth. But in reality, McCarthy, all races should be like the one I'm running in now. Money should not be a factor.
And let's assume for the moment that all of the, you folks running for the Democratic nomination are all good guys, and we have one woman candidate from Helena, the state senator, Mignon Waterman, who was on the show. Let's assume for the moment that everybody's, got a brain, are well-intentioned, etc. What is it that sets you apart from, what's different about you? Why would the voters say, I'm going to go for Larry Jent? Because?
I'm the youngest, I'm the most energetic, I'm the only one with a military background, I'm the only one with any sort of a legal background, and I'm the candidate that's exerting leadership in this race because I've been directing the discussion and the debate from day one. I'm the one that challenged everybody to debate. You'll find that I'm the one that everyone's agreeing with when we have debates on issues. And most importantly, McCarthy, you'll find out that I'm taking positions. I'm not giving you answers tonight such as, gee, that's an important problem for all Montanans. I love Montana, cherry pie, my worst buck. I'm not going to give an answer like that.
In fact, Larry provided an issue sheet to the program beforehand, and he is very specific about a lot of abortion. He's pro-choice, gun control. He's against gun control. Would that include assault weapons? I mean,
that's a tough one. I'll tell you what I think. I would have voted like Pat Williams did against the bill. I can't see why in the world anybody thinks they need an SKS in their closet, but there are many Montanans who feel that any sort of gun control, particularly those that directed at semi-automatic weapons, is a step along the way to too much government control and infringement on their Second Amendment rights. And because of that, and because of the feelings of those folks, and because I've taken that position in the past when I've run for the State House, then I'm committed, and I'll stay committed that way, that I'm fundamentally against gun control. However, I have no opposition to what's called an instant check. That check which allows a fingerprint to be taken, a computerized fingerprint, that instantly checks to see if someone's a felon. Even the National Rifle Association agrees that we should keep guns out of the hands of convicted criminals, and the instant check is a good way to do it.
You support the what you refer to as the Pat Williams bill on the wilderness, 1.7 million acres, 300,000 acres of special use areas. Have you studied and considered the the bioregion bill that's been propounded and supported by a goodly number of citizens in the Northwest, including here in Montana, that would create. Excuse me, what's that called? The bill for the ecoregion bill, the bioregion bill.
Yeah, the Northern Rockies Ecosystem Protection Act.
The Northern Rockies Eco Protection Act that would create a regional ecosystem.
McCarthy, I'm aware of it, but
right.
I haven't studied it.
Okay, thanks. Good answer. Honest man.
Yeah, so I don't know what it says.
Right. And Larry Jent would support the Kennedy-Kassebaum bill on ensuring portability of insurance, including coverage of pre-existing conditions. Supports the president's plan to balance the budget by the year 2002. Supports an increase in the minimum wage on the national level. Opposes the Republican tax cut when it's at the expense of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And I should tell you that Larry's a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Foundation for North American Wild Sheep. You go to Congress. We've had a lot of erstwhile reformers go to Congress. Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans certainly went in as reformers 2 years ago. Reformers, revolutionaries, however they want to call themselves. Well, in what ways do you think that? Have you envisioned ways that the Congress could be doing its job in a more effective way organizationally, or is that not something you spend a lot of time worrying about?
No, that's something I have spent some time worrying about, and it's almost like you're reading my mind, because before I came over here tonight, I turned on the channel to C-SPAN, and C-SPAN had the debate there. And the debate concerned what bills were going in and what riders were being passed by either party with the obtuse and overt purpose of defeating the bill. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that if one were to really get on a committee that had power, that the Committee on the Rules that governs how such things happen in the House of Representatives would be the most powerful committee of all. All lawyers know that to have a mastery of courtroom technique, if you don't know the rules of procedure and evidence, it doesn't matter how great a case you have, what a great client you have, or what great legal theory you have, if you don't get a chance to talk and say what you want to say. Now, in the House of Representatives right now, I've never seen such convoluted procedure as I've seen for watching for an hour or two. Watch the House for an hour or two at a contentious point in time, and it doesn't seem that a great deal is getting done. We have people asking for unnecessary votes to stall for time, adding amendments for the purpose of making sure legislation doesn't happen, not to make sure the amendment happens. And so I'm very concerned about that. I would have to think that most Americans who watch C-SPAN and watch the House of Representatives in action would be very disappointed in not only the procedure used by their leaders, but the lack of civility that we see in the House.
Mm-hmm. And the CIA and its budget, somewhere around $40 billion a year. Have you given much thought to that?
I have not. In fact, I haven't, since the campaign started, I haven't given a lick of thought to the CIA. What little I know of the CIA, I learned when I was in Special Forces, which wasn't a great deal, because of the well-known intelligence principle of compartmentalization, which in English means we don't want you to know what the other fellows are working on. I had virtually no first-hand experience with the CIA. I don't know how they operate. I don't have a very good idea of what they do.
Neither do I.
And there's an intelligence oversight committee in both the Senate and the House that has the role of doing such things. And that committee ultimately is the civilian oversight to the budgetary process and to the operational process. With, of course, the President ultimately, through the Director of Central Intelligence, has the ultimate control. But the House has oversight on that, just as the Senate does.
Going back to campaign finance is something that you're very interested in, reform there. And this is something that I've brought up on other occasions. Right now, the way the federal presidential campaigns are set up, you know, the Democrats get X millions of dollars to run their campaign, the Republicans get X millions of dollars.
This is on the presidential campaign.
Right,
That
right,
level, yeah.
right. And they also get lots of millions of dollars to help pay for their conventions.
I was not aware that taxpayers' money went to pay conventions.
I believe I'm correct in that as part of that whole
okay.
schlemiel, there is a cut there. But I mean, this is a country which is always dealing with, you know, third parties and fourth parties, and these days they're taken somewhat more seriously than they have in the past. I mean, you're running as a Democrat. A self-interested vote, let's say if you were in the House, would preserve a system that directed, you know, public monies at two particular parties, which happen to be the biggest parties. What happens in a democracy when other people and other parties don't have, you know, similar opportunities? I mean,
the only public campaign finance funding is for the office of President of the United States. And that goes to the two major parties. If the third party became, through a grassroots effort of electing congressmen and senators, the second party, then one would think that it would get that funding also, that the law would allow for it. For congressional races, of course, there is no public funding. There's one independent in Congress right now, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and there are other people who have served in the past and others who have run. I don't know if there are any, other than Bernie, I don't know if there are any other serious candidates from third parties out there now. I have a feeling, at least in California and other places, there may well be at this time.
And as we're heading toward a conclusion, we're not in a dramatic hurry. We've got a few minutes left. What questions have I not asked you that you would like to have asked?
Well, that's a very open-ended question. That almost gives rise to a stump speech, McCarthy, but I'll restrain myself, and maybe we'll.
Well, I mean,
maybe we'll go
talk about again. We could go back to the Congress. You know, I did have a. You know, we have a lot of discussion about, you know, and you list yourself as pro-choice, right? Does pro-choice for you would, and you're probably like many of us still thinking about this. There's increasing discussion about pro-choice, meaning the choice of the right to die. Have you given that any thought?
No.
That is to say, you know, I mean, some of the states have passed, and there's the issues before their courts as to whether, you know, assisted suicide is, you know, permissible or not permissible or what have you. That, for, you know, a lot of Americans is becoming a serious issue. Whether the government should be in the business of you know, stopping people from taking their own lives if they so choose to do it.
I have a problem.
But that's a privacy right,
yeah.
in other words, under the law.
I have a problem with stretching the right of privacy so far to allow a person who may well not be competent to make the decision to engineer the decision to take their own life. I don't know that that's a matter of federal legislation, though. I think that's what states do. On a more Main Street issue, which is something I do know something about, I support the concept of living wills, and which allow people to direct their terminal medical care, and that, in fact, can be done now in the state of Montana. And so that's something I know something about. The Dr. Kevorkian issue is not something I've thought a great deal about, and I'm not sure that's something that would come before the Congress, although it well might.
The railroads, that's something that I brought up with Chet Blaylock. And it seems to me over the past several years that both the federal government and the state government, at least this state government, I don't mean Roscoe in particular, but state government in general, have both the feds and the states have backed away from oversight of the railroads. Do you see any room for improvement there on a federal level?
I do. Most realistically, because of the interstate nature of rail commerce, the Interstate Commerce Commission would be the likely vehicle for regulation of railroads at the federal level. At the state level, it's more difficult, I think, because of the cost of regulating such a massive enterprise. And, you know, good arguments can be made, good federalism arguments can be made for the contrary position. I've never handled any railroad cases whatsoever. I don't know a blessed thing about it. I've seen a lot of railroads the last couple of weeks when I've been on the High Line, but that's in eastern Montana. There's one thing I'd like to talk about that we haven't really discussed.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes for you to do just that.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the minimum wage.
Okay.
I support an increase in the minimum wage, as does the President, as does Chet Blaylock, and virtually every Democratic candidate. And I believe the Congress needs to pass an increased minimum wage because we need to value work. And we need to tell people in this country that if they work a decent job, they'll be paid a decent wage. We need to pass a minimum wage because it's the right thing to do. We need to pass a minimum wage pragmatically because you can't live on the minimum wage as it is now. And we need to pass a minimum wage for Montana families because Montana families are hurting now in ways other than economics because of low wages. Our per capita income is very low, as you know, McCarthy. In every state where the minimum wage has been raised, and every time when the minimum wage has been raised, wages have gone up across the board. The low wages we're paying for in social cost right now, and increased welfare benefits for those who feel no incentive to work. And we pay for them in social cost and parents who can't be home with the children doing the homework because they have a second job, and a parent who can't attend the PTA because they're working that extra 4 hours at the mini-mart to make the rent. And so that's why I'm so strong a supporter of a minimum wage, and the Congress does that. That's their function, and that's something I intend to do.
Larry, I want to thank you for being here, and I've enjoyed our discussions, and I like your tie, too.
Well, thank you. This is the official 1994 Olympic tie. I did not ski in the games, of course, but I'm the athletes representative to the board for the biathlon team, and so that's how I end up with doodads like this. And so that's the source of the tie. Is John Ingan is a friend of mine who was on the '94 team.
Best wishes with your campaign.
Thank you, McCarthy.
I hope we meet again. And
I hope we get back
folks,
over here.
that's it for this week of A Public Conversation. I want to thank Jeff Smith for handling the show a couple of weeks ago and for directing tonight's show, and our crew, Richie Doyle and Sean Gant, and whoever else is hanging out there helping. And thanks to Missoula Community Access Television in the city of Missoula that supports this First Amendment station. So good night. We'll see you next week when we're going to have the Missoula Local Government Study Commission on the air, as well as Justice Chip Erdman, who wants to save his seat on the Supreme Court. Good night, everybody. Music up.
Good night, everybody.
Coyote stuck his nose down to get a whiff of a large piece of raw meat draped over a cyanide trap. But before he could take a bite, Pig rushed up and devoured the meat and trap in one...